Hi, everyone. This is working group 4 meeting. So we have I think two presentation lineup today. I have noted down in my document. I'm not sharing the screen because there's no point because I'll just read it up. Helm support in FU using Flux tool chain by Fiacra, and the second is presentation by Toll on Helm support options in FU. So I think we can get started now, and because recording will be there for everyone to see. So we can get started. So, Fiakra, would you like to go first? Because you
Sure,
mentioned,
yeah, sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's a
I
pity
think
we
you
don't
can,
have a broader audience, but sure we can go ahead anyway.
yeah. So you can start
Um,
presenting.
sure. Can you see my screen? You can.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, okay, I'll show a crack on anyway. Yeah, so Fikra here from EST. So I don't want to steal your thunder, Tal, but I think this document that you've done up quite, it kind of captures pretty succinctly what we're attempting to do. But I guess I'll run quickly through. I think both yourself and Vim were on the meeting, the TSC presentation, but I'll try and kind of run through the what we've done in terms of kind of leveraging Flux to deploy. So I guess this is D3 or D2 option 2 here on the diagram. Um so yeah, I'll pop over. As I said before, yeah, so we just deployed Sandbox. There are a couple of workload clusters. We've added an additional uh, repo with some packages that we've done up. So one for the deploying the Flux controllers, so the Helm controller, source controller, and then we've a couple of other uh, packages that kind of leverage the CRDs within Flux to deploy the Helm charts. So I'll just run through quickly. Deploying edge one, add a new deployment, pulling it from external package. This one, default. Um, and yeah, within the package, I'll just go through it again. So you've kind of standard Kubernetes resources, so your cluster roles stuff, the CRDs that are required for mainly for the source controller, and one or two for the Helm controller. Given it a namespace, and these are your two deployments, your Helm and source
Am I the
controller.
only one who's not seeing a shared screen? I guess so.
Oh,
No,
I
I'm able to see perfectly fine.
okay.
Okay, it's
I
just
can see.
okay.
I can see.
Yeah, I can see it
Right.
as
All right.
well.
Sorry, that.
Sorry.
Okay, no
Would
problem.
you, shall he stop and start again?
Reshare. Okay, one
Yeah,
second. One second. Desktop two. Share. Any
I
better?
can see. I can see.
No, not for me. Sorry. I don't know. It's been a problem with Zoom for me for a while. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Can
Please
can
go
can
ahead.
you
Right.
log in again, Tom? Maybe.
Yeah, let me try that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll pause for 2 seconds
Yeah, yeah.
while you reconnect. Okay, I'll try again maybe.
So, if just quick question, if I can ask, like
Sure.
just
Sure,
yeah.
sure.
So these packages which you have made, does it
hmm
contain controller as well?
Yeah,
Like,
so we've leveraged the Flux ecosystem itself has I probably should so you have your Flux CD parts. So installation, where am I going? To components. Your Helm controller. So here you have, so this is kind of, so ignoring the notification controller, which we weren't interested in. So you have your Helm controller and your source controller um, that we're deploying.
so
So
this
essentially,
is
yeah.
yeah.
So your
I'm
source
not.
controller is pulling from. So that's where you're pulling your source from,
Yeah.
whether it be Git or Harbor, whatever. And then it's passed to the Helm controller, picks up the CRD for the chart itself, and then deploys the Helm chart.
deploys the Helm chart, right?
Yeah.
Right. So Helm chart is there. It is there, right?
So the Helm chart is as is. So it we didn't so it in the as part of the POC we just reused
Uh-huh.
the Free 5GC Helm charts, which I'll kind of I'll go through maybe
Right.
in the next
Okay.
iteration. But yeah, so this year so these are your two controllers here,
Mm-hmm.
as part of the Flux deployments. Other kind of security stuff which may not be may be redundant, but we're yeah.
So these are the default controller. These are not like custom controller, right?
No.
Right.
Say again. Sorry, these are
These,
the yeah no
the,
these are the default
yeah,
Flux controllers.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't have any control over it. Like, sorry if I'm asking too many questions right now, or shall I
No,
finish? Yeah.
go
So
ahead. Go
these,
ahead.
No, this
No.
is
I mean, what I'm asking is that these are the default one coming from those projects, and
Yeah.
we do not have any control over it yet, right?
no in all this setup here. There's
Uh-huh.
no new operators or controllers. It's all out of the box from
Out of the box.
Flux.
Yeah. So we're
Yeah.
just using the 3PP Flux card, the controllers that are provided by
So
Flux. Yeah.
all
Okay.
we've done is created kept packages.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
So yeah, I think I understand. So we will not, I mean, this is gonna onboarding the Helm into the community system via, KPD packages kind of thing, right? And we cannot, take any custom call, and we don't have any control over it. Like,
oh, you do. Oh,
okay.
you do. Because you can use the kept and all of the kept functions to change the
Uh,
values of that YAML.
okay. Okay. I think I should, now I can finish that.
Yeah. So in fact,
I'll,
you have
yeah.
maybe too much of ability to change anything,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but maybe if Pinker goes through it, you can
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you
he
know
can
what?
point out these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Let's
Yeah.
hitting
finish the meeting.
some weird error. So yeah, this system's been up a while, so I'm just going to try Edge 1 instead. Okay. And hopefully the demo gods don't mess with me. Um, so same package, just targeting Edge 2. So hopefully, yeah, that looks a bit better. Um, okay, so we can have a look at then. Just what's the namespace now? I'm deploying it on Edge 2 on my. 1 second. Um, do I have the kube context? I do. Now it's Flux system. Okay, so there you have your two controllers running on Edge 2 for. So these are two Flux two controllers that are part of the Flux deployment, that we're going to use to deploy the Helm chart. So if I go back here, then so we'll just deploy the. So we're kind of playing around with a couple of different packages. I think Vim, I got a reply on you. So we had issues around the Free5GC in terms of networking. We're deploying just on a single cluster at the moment. And I've split them up into the Free5GC charts and then the UE ransom into a separate chart, or into a separate package even, sorry. Um, and we can take a quick look at that. So essentially this is just, so these are the custom resources that we're using from Flux. So here we have your source, which is referenced in the Free5GC charts upstream, off the main branch. And here we're just saying everything under, just, monitor everything under the charts directory, in the Git repo. And then obviously this is the Helm release then is determining which chart you want to deploy from that charts directory. There's different options in terms of source. We can use OCI, we can use Helm repo, but I was using Git repo for the moment. So here we're just targeting the Free5GC chart, and we can give it a specific version, and then we're referencing the source ref that I just showed you here, so the Git repo. So this is where it's pulling it from. It's quite extensive, the API within Flux to control the actual chart deployment. And then finally here this is where we're referencing a config map that contain the values.yaml input for the chart, which I've also packaged here. And this is just taking pretty much a copy of what's in the default values within the chart. So these are
But
all
that
probably familiar, like in terms of so if you deploy toggles, your interfaces, etc.
but that's the override in effect to what's in the upstream package.
Yeah,
So you
yeah, yeah.
override it there, and you can change that using kept functions or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I did
So
initially in the initial pocket kind of I was playing around with kind of, setting the namespace and, maybe
um,
setting values, overriding values within using the mutators or was it mutators and what's the other one? Mutators and injectors.
uh, yeah, and then
Yeah,
there's the kept function hierarchy that Vim and the guys built.
yeah.
There's a pretense as well there. Fikra, I sorry to kind of be home with the holiday, but they've if you change a value, then you can actually specify values directly, and then you can specify a values file coming in via Flux, and then in the third, it'll go to the value first, then it'll go to the file,
So there's order of
uh,
precedence. There's order of
and
precedence. I think so you have either the default chart values that are packaged with the chart, or you have here we can reference inline values essentially, like, so instead of a config map here you can do inline values. And then I think the highest precedence is the local config map. So
Charles
he
has his
takes
hand up there.
he takes priority. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, quick question. So does Flux also handle, in this case, Helm plugins? I would imagine that technically for them to work, they would have to be, they'll be running in the operator. So if they have all these requirements, you might have to create a custom version of the Flux operator. Am I correct?
Hmm. For plugins, I am not sure, but obviously the API itself um does have
Doesn't
pretty
doesn't
heavy.
look like,
It
yeah.
doesn't have plugins now, but it has all of your kind of standard LTM built in, your install upgrades, rollback. Um, it has the hooks there to handle those. Custom plugins, I don't think so. I'm not sure. Does that
Uh,
answer your question? I don't know.
It answers my
So
question
what's
that
the
we don't know.
purpose?
Yeah.
Why was the purpose
uh,
to plug in? Tom? What's the purpose of your question?
Well, because I have seen vendors with Helm charts use custom plugins in their Helm charts for various purposes. So it's kind of a way to make Helm charts extensible. So you can use plugins to pull in values that not
Own
from
a, oh,
values.yaml,
yeah,
not user values, but actually to pull them from either the environment or some external place.
yeah.
Or to do
Own
things
app
that
had a
you just
Yeah, ONAP
yeah,
had
go
a pretty ugly one for deploying
ahead.
the
That's
the
true.
OM Helm charts. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
yeah,
So some,
according to the Flux, just Google it here when you were talking. It looks like they don't support it, but anyway, okay.
they don't support. Okay. So yeah,
Yeah, so it's
maybe
yeah.
that's for
There's
good
a
for
link.
good
There's a
reason.
link
Yeah.
to it. Link. They have some rationale there on the link that you can
Maybe
quote.
some good for good reason. Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
here you can see, so so the Helm charts is picked up and deployed. Um, Outside of that, obviously we can run an update by creating a new revision. Um, so this is kind of, modifying sorry, I need to edit it, don't I? So pretty standard, like, you can edit your values in line. Um, probably
so this
again
is
like
just text pasted into a config map, right? A single
yeah,
value. Can you scroll all the way to the
yeah,
top?
yeah, it doesn't render very well. But yeah, so
Yeah.
it's just a raw values YAML within within the data object and within the config map.
Right. So if we, for example, write a kept function to generate this, it would
Yes.
basically render out, we'll have to print out YAML into a config map.
Yeah, it would be like in terms of even, I know this is kind of UI stuff, but here obviously you would have your key value pair, but it'd be nice if you could render the I don't know in terms of YAML nesting how that would work here, but yeah, that would be. But yeah, I think the what we were thinking in terms of the kind of the maybe the way forward, like we were proposing to maybe wrap this up and tie it in the bow and maybe document it somewhere, and maybe have a hello world kind of example for people to use and put on boards their Helm charts,
Yeah.
as is now. Um, but
Yeah, I think you
obviously,
have a.
yeah,
So go ahead, Fikra.
no, well, I guess in reference to kind of
Yeah.
these ideas, like so I guess this point, so where we source the input values from and how we source them would be interesting. I know this may turn into a kind of modeling discussion. I think that was your reasoning, Tim, but
Well, we'll come to
how
that.
yeah how
Yeah.
we pass the values to the chart to whoever deploys the charts
Do
could
you do
be
you know do you have a link there to our kit packages that we did for the Flux? They're in the Nordics, but
you should do, yeah, 1 second.
yeah, we should. I think they're freely available to everyone. So
There, yeah,
uh,
it should be.
well, we thought maybe for R2 we could maybe create a hello world using kind of using Nginx or something, and let's just say if you want to use Flux, just have kind of document it because that's really
Yeah,
that's really it's pretty, I wouldn't say easy to do this, but it's kind of out of the box. Might not be I think for people to get a start on Nephew with their own stuff, it's kind of an
yeah.
easy way to get in.
Like this
Uh,
is your Flux kind of Flux deployment with the couple of, like, obviously Flux has other bells and whistles with notification controller customized. We didn't really look at that stuff because we didn't really see the value in it. But say I was playing around with doing a PV for deploying the Flux components across all edge clusters or whatever. So it's the same. It's package variant stuff, and you guys know that stuff inside out. Um, but yeah, but that's so the inside. So I ran the update there, tore down what I wanted. You know, um, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Um,
Okay.
and
what's
yep.
what's what's the Nordics URL again? Can you just go back to the
I'll paste it in the chat. Will I?
Nordics Nephew Helm? Yeah.
Where is my chat window?
But that's a private repo, right? So basically we don't have access.
Oh, you do.
It is
Should
no,
have.
it's private. No, it's private.
It's
It is private.
Is it? Yeah.
It is,
it's private.
unfortunately.
I
Yeah.
thought it's public. Public. Okay.
It
Correct.
probably
Okay.
should be public. Yeah, so
Yeah, we'll make that public. There's no problem making this public.
there's no point in me
Yeah.
posting that in the chat now, is it really? But yeah, I'll wrap it up there and maybe leave time for more discussion. If there's any other questions, you know.
Not a question, but a tip maybe. So assuming we do this, right, and have, as we said, enhance the kept SDK, the kept SDK that we have right now to maybe support utility functions, that would generate, values that YAML do the rendering and everything inside a config map to kind of prepare it for Flux. I think we could also do validation, right? Because
Yeah, exactly.
you can so there's no schema validation in Helm, but you could run the Helm template command internally and just see that the values YAML actually render successfully.
Yeah.
And kind of give show error message maybe even if they don't. So before we even get to, we can do a shift left validation before we even get to rendering with Flux. So that's a possibility.
Yeah, actually, in ONET we did a Helm template and then we validated before we actually sending to Kubernetes. So it's done in ONET. Yeah.
Your diagram here, the blue box between D2 and D3 here in your diagram, Tal, would be where I do that,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in effect, then we have different implementations of Helm that people can pick depending on how much or how little they want to use Nephew or what their legacy is or whatever.
Yeah, actually, there's a question from me. I've just raised my hand, Sandeep here. So, related to the same thing, how much of the Nephew capabilities we can exploit or use with this approach? In the sense,
Um,
yeah, this is great.
everything
Absolutely.
in the management, I would say everything that you have in the management cluster. So you
Mhm.
can decide. So you can use. There's nothing stopping you using the package variant sets, package variants. You would have to have some sort of convention to use IPAM or that sort of specialization. But so in other words, you'd have to have some way of taking those values and getting them into the value set YAML, and that could be different for each Helm chart, of course. But it's also probably different for each network function if you're in the Nephew kept world anyway. So
Mhm.
really, I don't think there's very many limitations. Really,
Yeah.
it's just a different way, and
Mhm.
especially if we come up
Like
with
I think
some sort of in that kind of between D2 and D3 box or whatever it was, if we come up with a good way of handling that, it should really be kind of a tool in the toolbox that people can use.
Right.
this could be if we look at the structure of them, other than the namespace, it's generally the package itself. If we were looking at kept packaging or packaging this in a form of a generic package, you have your source and you have your Helm release and potentially some way of popping it in the config map. So you could define a generic package that could be reusable potentially, for
Yeah. Um, my question, maybe I'll try to put it other way, is like, what are the core uh, values or the principle Nephew was working? My understanding, I'll just correct, and maybe Tal and Stephen can correct me if I'm wrong, that we could take some actions on the go, right? When there is something happening wrong with the NF, right? Some sort of intent-based realization kind of thing
Yeah.
which was my understanding of Nephew when it comes up, and when I started understanding it. So you can take advantage of that because we can call the APIs of the Kate and the run time and query all those NFs and its values and its APIs and its states and all those things, and then we can take some sort of a call onto that. And at the same time, we can realize the intent, whatever the high level intent user specifying. That was my understanding of the benefit of the Nephew. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And I could see that when the Free Fire
Yeah.
GC Helm were converted into the operators by automation team, and I
But
could see that. Yeah,
why would this mitigate? Why would this make that more difficult?
no, I'm not saying it is not.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
asking this is going to be. I'm just trying to understand that. Okay, it is in that line or not. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
asking.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
But I guess, yeah,
So
just the investigation was, or initial investigation was to, how can we easily allow
yeah,
newcomers, to onboard with existing Helm charts. I guess
yeah,
there is a
yeah,
danger of people becoming stuck at this point,
yeah,
or stuck at, one of these points, and this is never achieved. But yeah, I guess it was a kind of a quick onboarding kind of
yeah,
exercise, just a
yeah.
proof of
All
concept,
right.
really.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So
Like,
maybe sorry, I apologize.
no, no, no. Sorry, Thal. What I'm trying to say, just conclude on that. This is the very nice way to onboard. I think this is one of the ways to onboard the Helm chart. But what I'm trying to understand is, after that we onboard those Helm charts and NFs are deployed, what are the NFU capabilities which we are trying to explore and we are exposing can be taken, right? Can be used. Like, for example, as I gave an example, like intent-based realization, taking custom actions based on the current scenarios. Can all this be possible here? This is just for my understanding. Or is it just like we just gonna onboard and we have onboarded them into Nephew?
Uh, if you think about it, the values that you have exposed to Nephew, say in the D2 to D3, will be okay. If you're working in a pure Nephew world, you'll have exposed some values in the kept packages, and that, I guess, is what the Nephew. If you want to go back to the Nephew Watcher, things can manage where you can watch. Likewise, that type of information is should also be available back over the watcher if this works correctly. The way that it's a modeling question really. You want to expose a certain level of indirection from your network functions out to the outside world, and that should be some small set of what needs to be of the important values that each network function should expose. The mechanism inside the network function for implementing that probably shouldn't matter once the correct set of values are exposed and modeled and managed. Sorry, it's a very convoluted answer. It's more convoluted than I think I meant. Now, I think it's going to be difficult, and there's been I've been involved in an awful lot of smoke-filled rooms, and even after that, where we discussed what are those values, and that's where you always get into the problem with this stuff. What is the thing that needs to be exposed? Like, you have no problem in, IP address allocation must be done, but then when you actually get down to the functional things, it's a little bit trickier.
Yeah, I
But
think
this
there's
is
always a balance between exposing many properties versus
Exactly.
exposing little, and that varies a lot by vendor. It's
It does,
or
yeah.
even by product, right? It's how they design the specific product.
Exactly. And I mean, you go to one vendor or you go to one operator and they say, well, we only have a very small number of properties that we're interested in. And then you go to another one and they have the same, very small. Problem is just the set isn't the same. And
Yeah, well, I guess
and then,
that's where the schema, some form of schema discussion comes
yeah,
in
exactly.
here or whatever,
Yeah.
that's yeah. But I think that's sorry, I can't see if there's hands up or if there's anything or because I'm not too familiar with.
Now we've a small audience anyway, so I think it's
Okay, now we're good.
Yeah.
only 8 people on the call.
So
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up there if there's any other unless there's any other questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay then. I
Thanks.
think Thank you for this.
Actually, I do have a request. So Fiacre, so you keep moving ahead with this, which is great. So I wonder if the next step would really be to maybe write a simple kept function just to show that it could be integrated into Nefia right now. I think that would help you showcase that this option is real.
Okay.
Okay, and how just okay. So if I go back, so in terms of if we take, I'm looking for implementation detail here, but so we have a cat package here with with the flux CRs. We require a kept function to input to the config map. Is that the proposal?
Yeah, just to kind of generate that config map programmatically, right? Because
Yeah.
I think in the demo right now it's hard coded, right, in the kept package.
Yeah.
So it's like manually edited, that kind of inserted YAML in the config map. But I think if you show that you can actually generate that config map programmatically, I mean, that would be the full Nefio integration, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's we
You don't
were
have to do it.
no
Yeah.
no, but we were discussing internally what should be the next kind of tack, and we're quite interested in option 4 in
Right.
just in being engaged here, because I think we're not fully familiar with I'm not anyway fully familiar with operators and their many benefits, but um we were interested in maybe wrapping this up, having an example for reference. But yeah, maybe we can have a look at doing a kept function to generate the config map, definitely. But also just to mention, I think maybe Liam talk more on this, but we're keen to we're showing interest in option 4 also.
Yeah.
In terms of using the operator SDK.
Yeah.
Doesn't look doesn't look very, very, very far from. Sorry, this is your document, Hal. Sorry, but yeah, we have interested in option 4 also. So that's just to mention.
Okay, this seems like a good segue into the next presentation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was stealing your thunder. Sorry.
Not at all. No. It's we're all collaborating on this. So let me. So should I go ahead and share?
Yeah. Please start.
Okay. I apologize for all my technical difficulties with Zoom. I keep jumping between Firefox and Chrome, and each one features different bugs for me. Can you see the screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
good. So, so first of all, this quick diagram here, this is not, it's confusing, but this is not an architectural diagram at all. This is a decision flow. So these lines are not data lines, these are implication lines, right? So if you make a decision, what is the next implication of something we need to do, right, of that decision? So yeah, that's a little bit confusing, but we found this kind of diagram very useful. This idea came from Sudi on our team, who this really helped us kind of think through the problems and realize, okay, you make one decision that leads to another point where you have to make another decision, and then you can kind of follow through that process. So we found this very helpful internally to think of things. So this is why you see like one of these options here leads to the potential of some sort of coalescence here. So I'll explain these in more detail. So this document has 3 starting points for vendors, right? So there's starting point A is what we've been talking about today a lot, a vendor that is already invested in Helm charts, right? And we assume that this is actually the vast majority of vendors, right? This is why it's listed first. We're noting here that there are actually 2 ways that Helm charts can be used, or 2 aspects of what Helm charts do. One of them is to internally create the configuration for that specific network function. But Helm charts don't only create configurations, right? They also create all the Kubernetes resources, deployments, daemon sets, services, RBAC, all that stuff, right? So this is a decision sometimes that a single Helm chart, according to its inputs, might output different configurations of the product, right? This is not always the case. Sometimes different charts are used for different. So for example, the same product might have 5 different charts. Each chart is a different configuration for it in terms of, say, scaling or something else, right? So sorry, we were getting a lot of Slack messages here. So so yeah, that's another thing that Helm can do, and we have to take into consideration as well, in terms of integration. I mentioned here too that sometimes there are Helm plugins, but yeah, we're putting that in a bracket because we're not sure how many are using it and what the implication would be. Sorry, let me quickly mute this. Why can't I mute? Okay, sorry guys. All right, the other. So I'll go here in length in a minute, but I just want to go do the overview here. So the second starting point is a vendor that has already building Kubernetes operators, but not in the, sorry, I need to shut this all up here. I'm getting a lot of noise. All right. Yeah, but this specific operator has not been built for Nefio and its models, so it would still need some conversion. I'll talk about that. And the third starting point is kind of we haven't seen quite yet, but these are greenfield projects, right? So a product that maybe hasn't had any packaging yet and is considering starting with Nefio as its starting point and our eventual Nefio SDK that will exist, right? One point I'm mentioning that for all vendors, it doesn't matter what your starting point is, that you will need something like this. And this is something I've mentioned in the past too, when trying to say that, it doesn't matter if you're using Helm or an operator, because in any case, you will have to do some sort of conversion from Nefio models to your configuration. And when I say some kind of, I'm not even specifying the mechanism here. It could be a kept function. It could be something internal to the operator itself. It could be something in Flux. It could be something in operator SDK. The mechanism itself and even where it's running, I'm not even trying to specify here. I'm just saying that it must exist at some point, right? And I think that's a point, Liam, that you made as well. And, it doesn't mean just Nephio common types, because we're trying to create this extensible meta model where, we have our common types, for example, a UPF, but it will always be possible to insert, vendor types there too. And it's kind of up to the vendor here if they want to make it a one-to-one. For example, you can use this extension meta model to just shove in all your Helm values, right? If you want to do it that way. Or you have an opportunity here to create maybe a more abstract, customer-friendly version of it that you will then convert to your own product configurations, right? So here there are design choices to be made. But the point is that something like this probably always exists, right? Some sort of conversion. So let's delve into, what we're talking about today is Helm charts, right? So far we've talked about actually 4 different options. So that's what we tried to summarize here. So 3 of these options, and sorry for the confusion here, there are options of 1, 2, and 4. I'm bundling here together because all of these options are using Helm as it's supposed to be used. That's what's interesting about them. They all, at the end of the day, run Helm install. And one option that we have right now is a config sync, which we are using as the reference implementation for R1 at least. It does have actually support for Helm charts, right? So I can give you a quick link here, but yeah, we haven't used this yet, and we don't have any demo to show, but yeah, it kind of does something very similar to what Flux does. So you can see, you can specify as a KRM your Helm chart. It uses customize. Yeah, it has its own workflow, not kind of similar to what we saw with Flux, but a little bit different. But it is fully supported in config sync. So we haven't really explored this option in depth, but if there's interest, we can definitely do that. Option 2 is what we saw today, right? Using Flux, which again uses Helm as it's supposed to be used. At the end of the day, it runs Helm install. Option 4, what we're calling here, is using the operator SDK. And this again uses Helm as it's intended to be used with the Helm install command. And we're saying here this is our current preference from Google officially. And our technical reasoning is that it's a supported path. It does provide a migration path towards a full-blown operator without Helm, right? Because once you get into using operators, deploying operators, you're part of the way there already, right? And obviously, these are operators that still have all of Helm's limitations for day 2 changes. But they're still participating in the operator world. And this is so this is kind of like the best of both worlds, maybe, or, all of these options have trade-offs. And 3, if we do go this route, and this is where it ties into decisions that we have to make about the Nephio SDK for building operators. If we go with the core OS operator SDK, we kind of have a nice convergence here where we can use the same basic SDK for killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It's both. It would be our SDK for from scratch operators, but we will use exactly that same product for also wrapping Helm and operators, right? So yeah, so there's a decision graph from another part, regarding the operator SDK that also connects to this decision graph here. So we mentioned this as a possibility. Now, I haven't written this into the document, but I should mention, so this is the technical reasoning, but there's also a business reasoning. And the business reasoning is that we do hear from customers, telcos, that they're expecting Nephio to disrupt some of the status quo, right? The status quo being Helm charts. So we're always debating, versus the decision here are, if we make Helm a first-class citizen and use something like Flux, it makes a very, very easy onboarding path to Nephio. But the concern is that it could be too easy, right? And mean that there's never a path moving towards full-blown operators, right? And that's the concern. But I should mention here that we're not saying that you have to choose a single option even, right? There's the opportunity for us also to choose more than one option, or even all of them, right? But obviously there's implications for SIG2 and technical debt. Every option that we add and becomes supported needs to be tested and everything. So trade-offs with, every option has a trade-off, and of course, choosing multiple options also has trade-offs. So yeah, that's what I'm mentioning here. And I'll add to another way, instead of using operator SDK, we had the nice demo from Samsung about actually translating Helm charts directly into operators, which is another way of achieving the same thing, right? So it's kind of taking the Helm chart, turning it into operator. The difference is that this option really doesn't use Helm install anymore. It actually removes Helm entirely from the equation. So mentioning it here for completion. There is a third option too that we've actually discussed quite a bit internally in Google, which we sometimes call the sandwich option. And John has also spoke of this, and it's already partially supported in Porch. The idea being, and this is a very interesting one, is to actually, it's a shift left approach. It's exploding the Helm chart into its resources inside the Porch pipeline. And let's not dismiss this entirely, because it has some very interesting pros. Because just like we saw for Flux, where we have to generate the Helm inputs, we would do the same thing. We would need a kept function to do that. But we have an interesting opportunity to use our existing kept pipeline to make changes to those resources after the Helm chart runs. So we could do all the kinds of injections, everything that we do right now with R1 would be possible using Helm. This is powerful and flexible, but also I would say a little bit confusing, right? Because you have two ways to change resources here. You can actually modify the Helm chart itself with all the Jinja 2 templating, or you can write a kept function and change it as well. So there will be, so as powerful as this is, I wonder how many vendors would really want to choose this. Right. So we're mentioning it here for completion, and it's an interesting point that already basically works, right? There is basically a kept function that can take a Helm chart and explode it into its resources. Right. And for completion 2, I'm mentioning again starting point B. If we're not using Helm, well, we still need a kept function to generate the vendor CRD in this case for the vendor-specific operator, right? So that still exists, right? So that's the commonality. And eventually, when we have a complete SDK, which we're going to talk about soon in SIG automation, then we'll have a much more powerful, we will have a fully supported inside Nephio path for doing everything, managing the extension types, managing our common types, and creating an operator that's basically nested inside the Nephio SDK that could benefit from our custom pipelines. Like this is the dream, to make it as easy as possible to not only create an operator, but integrate into our configuration as data pipeline.
Okay, I see raise hand by
oh, yeah, please go ahead. I can't see the hands when I share.
Yeah, I think this I kind of half guess the kept one, if you which is the option. Yeah, it could, because update and upgrade is also difficult in Helm. With this, you'd have a nice way of managing that. But my main point though, Tal, is to go back to if you go back to your top diagram.
Sure, the very top one.
Yeah, I don't see this. I think your point was well made, that you could use many of these, but you could also evolve. So maybe you
Also
go
true.
first with option 2, and then maybe go to option 4, and then go to, if you like, well, the D1, where you go to the pure Nephio world over time. And even in maybe different use cases or different functions, maybe you have a new network function that you go, full kept from the beginning, or you have an old one that, those works pretty well with Helm and, is stable, and you go with option 2. Or maybe there's something that's kind of halfway developed, so you can actually use, we can actually come up with kind of an evolution story here as well, using all of these.
That's true, and that should be part of our, I think I think a next step could be kind of a table of pros and cons for every decision. And what are the trade-offs? And yeah, part of one column should definitely be something about a migration path, an evolution path. Right.
We actually have for option 4. Would it be okay if we had a go at that, say, taking the Free5GC and seeing how far we can get with using the Helm operator, just as kind of a POC demo for a week or 2.
You mean the operator SDK kind of
Yeah.
approach?
Yeah.
That would be amazing. I mean, that would be a great contribution to this discussion.
And then we can see how it plays with Flux and how it plays with Nephio, and so we don't mind jumping on that for a week or 2 and seeing how far we can bring it. That's okay with you?
Yeah,
we'd love to get some help from you as well.
Actually, I think Red Hat might be even better help than us, because they it's very strongly integrated into their product, right? The operator SDK. Yeah. So it might be, you could, I think, touch base with a bit. But yeah, I would be happy to be participant in this as well, because Google, we're not vendors, but we care very much about, of course, the vendor experience in all of this, and that's the only way it can work. That all parties involved feel fully supported, right?
Okay.
Telcos, cloud providers, and vendors, right?
Okay, we jump on this for a week or 2, so we'll see how.
Okay.
Fikra has hand up, sir.
Yeah. Fikra.
Yeah, just very quickly, I guess to reiterate Liam's point, we can have a look at this, but I think I came to this space late, and I'm not looking at the Free5GC charts and a lot of the work that was done by you guys and Vim. The networking and the interconnectivity seems to be the biggest issue. So we probably might need some some debugging skills there if we do try and use that. But just yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, just to finally, Deadly. But in terms of what was I going to say? Do we still run into, like, is it? I'm not fully. I should know more about operators and controllers and stuff, but we still run into the scenario where you have a controller per chart, right? Running within the cluster. Does that concern? Is in terms of resources? Does that, or maybe levels of complexity, does that come into the equation at all?
Yeah, the idea of
in terms of raw numbers, like, yeah.
So in my opinion, it's not too important. It's more of a design issue. For example, for R1, we made the decision that all our Free5GC network functions will be in one operator. The code is separate, and it's, you can just create a different possibly make file that will just generate separate operators for each.
Okay.
Just was simpler for us, more straightforward, just to put it in one code base. So that was our decision. And it's kind of the same thing with home charts. As I mentioned here, some vendors have a one-to-one relationship between, you have one Helm chart per product layout.
Yeah.
Right. And a different layout, say for a different scale, would have a different Helm chart. Some actually have you with a lot of if-else statements inside the Helm chart. You can generate an entirely different set of resources from a single Helm chart. That gets very complicated. And, because you're basing everything on text, the text templating that Ginger provides. I'm not a fan of it. I think it gets very hard to validate
horrible.
all these configurations too.
Yeah,
it's kind of horrible. And but this is where it has to do with how you handle day 2 configuration changes as well. For example, let's say you want to scale up an existing configuration using Helm. Well, you could potentially put one of the values.yaml, something that would change the scale, but it might mean that you're actually generating different resources. For example, maybe suddenly you have a load balancer that you didn't have before, and a different set of services, and different IP addresses even, because you need to you need to allocate more components. So suddenly you have a completely different output, right?
Yeah.
And Helm can kind of handle the diff between this. Helm is very weak about day 2 changes, but it could do something there. So yeah, that's where it becomes maybe more tricky to kind of look at, well, what are the advantages of writing a real operator that would actually make those changes dynamically and intelligently too, programmatically, because it's not just doing a diff. It could, for example, make sure that while it is deleting pods, it maintains a connection, right? It can do a lot of things that Helm can never do, right?
No, it
Because
does it
all
more
Helm
gracefully,
can do,
does it more gracefully.
exactly.
Yeah.
So this, I didn't want to delve into. I tried to make this document as succinct as possible, but this is actually a big thing. People who try to use Helm's charts to the maximum, it starts to a little bit compete with what Nephio tries to do. And that's where, we try to kind of change the status quo. However, a lot of vendors don't even get into that. They use just Helm charts very straightforwardly. Every Helm chart just generates a single layout. And that's where, I think Samsung's translation starting point is, because, I believe that their SDK could really only work with the very straightforward ones, which only generate the same resources all the time, right? Because it ends up creating Go code that's hard coded, right, by definition, to just always generate the same resources. So, yeah, those Helm charts exist for sure. I don't know if that would fit every single Helm chart, right? Because the ones that start using if statements to generate different resources,
Would I be right? Sorry for we're nearly at time, but in terms of the operator SDK, is that maybe I'm wrong, but no, actually, it creates a CRD, right, essentially in the back end for the chart. But is it a one-shot conversion or a one-shot creation of the operator slash controller? No.
So I think it does use code generation, just like QBuilder and everything else. It generates Go code. You can run the tool again, and it will update your code. Honestly, I've used it about 3 years ago, and I don't remember all the details.
I just ran the tutorial today, yeah. So I'm kind of only just looking at it.
There you go. Yeah, and it might have improved since I last used it. So I think I need to refresh my own memory about its capabilities, and but I would say that probably Red Hat would be very happy to help with this, right? It's
hopefully we'll have a look and hopefully report back. Yeah, thanks.
That would be terrific. Yeah, and you could even keep us updated on Slack on your progress. Maybe we can collaborate and things.
Okay, can we use this Slack channel not this, but the one for we're not on Slack here. You know what I mean? The
Helm discussion, yeah.
The Helm discussion one. We'll use that rather than creating a new one.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're just about the time. I have just one question, last question, which I had in the agenda, is about the question which I think I had some time back. It's about what is the best possible way for Nephew to onboard to load the operators, right? So is it the whatever the way we are using right now is the use a cube builder thing and just make files to load it onto the clusters, or one of the thing which you just showed us, Tal, that kind of a dream that there will be some SDK which is going to come up and do everything. So what is the best way and what is the vision for loading the operators?
Right. So the best way, I think we're going to start, well, we're already started discussions about operator SDK in SIG automation, right? And Stephen shared a document yesterday that we worked on that kind of tries to have a functional spec of what we want to do. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's the issue of costs, right? How expensive will it be to onboard a network function to this technology? And we want to reduce that to as much as possible, right? So, you know, something like Flux has a very low cost. There's still a cost because I think you still would need to have a kept function to generate those inputs, the values.yaml.
Yeah.
I think that cost exists for everything. I mean, you can reduce it too if you just don't use Nephio models at all. That's also possible. So the question is, can we make that delta of cost between a full-blown operator versus using Helm charts as is as small as possible? I think that's our end goal, making onboarding easy.
No, yeah. I think that's our end goal. My question is about not specific to the Helm charts. I'm saying that in general, if someone wants to create a controller or create operator, right? Is the cube builder way of loading into the cluster is the best way, or do we plan to do something, some sort of UI or some sort of a packaging way of doing in future? Not related to the Helm chart, I'm saying.
Yeah, that's exactly the question, right? So what we're starting with now is trying to give a functional outline to what this SDK would look like. So what do we want this SDK to do for us? And this is the feedback from vendors, of course, is critical here because they are the users of this SDK, right? Would a GUI be part of that? Possibly, right? So that's questions that I think vendors have to answer because they're the ones, well, and possibly also system integrators. But right, would a GUI be helpful? If it's helpful, then yeah, we should work on that.
See, my practical experience was with the cube builder was that I have to go to each and every cluster and deploy my operator. And I don't know whether that was the best way to do it. Because I had to, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, go ahead. So, you know, for us at least, our deployment tool, so Helm is interesting because it's a deployment tool in addition to kind of a day zero design tool. Like you design your chart, but then you have the Helm install command that could help you deploy charts, and then, you know, you can have charts inside charts and things like that. For Nephio, at least right now, the deployment tool is the kept command, or you can use the Nephio GUI, which we've seen Fiacre use today. So Nephio has that deployment tool. So part of what our SDK has to do is not only create the operator, but also create the kept package for that operator. So, which would be pretty straightforward. If you look at our free 5GC packages, you know, in terms of the Kubernetes resources, all they do is deploy the operator, and then they deploy the config map for the CRD, sorry for the operator, CR. And then there are a few of the infrastructure requirements, for example, for interfaces, right? That we currently use IPAM injection from on the management cluster to fill in those. So yeah, the SDK should probably generate that kept package for you. But once it's generated for you, you would simply use a kept command line or the GUI to deploy that, right? So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll work more on that. Thank you. Okay, I think we have 5 minutes overtime. So I think if nothing is there, we can close this meeting.
Right.
Thanks very so much everyone for a great discussion.
Oh, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.